April 1865. The war is ending, but Abraham Lincoln is about to make a decision that will haunt him forever. Not about slavery, not about the Union, about something far more personal, far more devastating. A choice between being a president and being a father. A choice that will cost him everything. This is the story they don't teach you in school. By 1862, Abraham Lincoln had sent over 600,000 men to their deaths. The weight of every casualty pressed down on his shoulders like stones in a bottomless well. His advisors watched him age a decade in just 2 years. The lines on his face weren't from stress alone. They were from grief, from guilt, from the unbearable knowledge that every order he signed meant mothers would lose sons, wives would lose husbands, children would lose fathers. He rarely slept more than 3 hours a night. When he did, he dreamed of drowning. But there was a darkness in Lincoln's life that went beyond the war. February 20th, 1862. His beloved son, Willie, died of typhoid fever at just 11 years old. Mary Todd Lincoln never recovered. She held seances in the White House, desperate to contact their dead child. Lincoln himself would visit Willie's crypt, sometimes twice a week, unlocking the casket to hold his son's body. This wasn't just grief. This was madness born from unbearable loss, and it would cloud every decision Lincoln made from that moment forward. January 1st, 1863. Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. History remembers this as his greatest triumph, but here's what they don't tell you. Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves, at least not yet. He did it because he was losing the war. His military advisors told him it was the only way to cripple the Southern economy and prevent European nations from recognizing the Confederacy. The proclamation didn't even free all enslaved people, only those in rebel states. It was a military strategy disguised as moral righteousness. The price of freedom wasn't just paid by the enslaved, it was calculated by a president willing to use human lives as pawns. In 1863, letters emerged that historians tried to bury for decades. Lincoln wrote to personal friends expressing doubts about racial equality. "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union and is not either to save or destroy slavery," he wrote to Horace Greeley. To a colleague, he admitted, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it." These weren't the words of the great emancipator. These were the words of a pragmatic politician making impossible calculations. The man we built monuments to was far more complex, far more conflicted than the legend suggests. Truth is always more complicated than the story. By 1864, the death toll had surpassed 600,000 souls. That's more American deaths than in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. Lincoln authorized total war. Sherman's march to the sea burned entire cities, destroyed crops, and left civilians starving. Military historians call it necessary. Civilians called it hell on earth. And Lincoln? He called it the terrible arithmetic of war. Every drop of blood drawn with the lash shall be paid by another drawn with the sword. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the cost, and he paid it anyway. November 1864. Lincoln's bodyguard, Ward Hill Layman, begged him to take threats seriously. There had been over 30 documented assassination attempts already, but Lincoln refused additional protection. Some historians believe he wanted to die. After Willie's death, after the endless casualty lists, after the weight of 600,000 ghosts, perhaps death seemed like relief. "I have faith that the Almighty has His purpose in this," he told Layman. But was it faith or was it surrender? March 1865. The war is almost won, but Lincoln faces his darkest decision yet. His eldest son, Robert Todd Lincoln, wants to serve in combat.
Mary Todd is hysterical. She's already lost one son. She cannot lose another. Lincoln has sent thousands of sons to die. How can he spare his own? For 3 weeks he agonizes. Finally, he makes Robert a captain and assigns him to General Grant's staff, a position that keeps him from actual combat. It was the right choice for a father, but was it the right choice for a president? In that moment, Lincoln chose family over principle, and it would destroy him from within. 3 days before his assassination, Lincoln told his wife and close friends about a dream. I heard subdued sobs, as if a number of people were weeping. I went from room to room in the White House, but saw no one. I kept on until I arrived at the East Room, where I saw a corpse wrapped in funeral vestments. "Who is dead in the White House?" I demanded. "The President," was the answer. "He was killed by an assassin." Mary Todd begged him not to go to Ford's Theater that night. He went anyway. Some call it fate. Others call it a death wish granted. Perhaps Lincoln knew that the only way to escape the darkness was to embrace it completely. Good Friday. The war is over. The Union is saved. Abraham Lincoln should be celebrating his greatest triumph. Instead, he's exhausted, hollowed out, a man going through the motions. At 10:13 p.m., John Wilkes Booth enters the presidential box. The bullet enters behind his left ear, tears through his brain, and lodges behind his right eye. He never regains consciousness. For 9 hours, he clings to life. At 7:22 a.m., on April 15th, Abraham Lincoln dies. His last breath releases not just his life, but the unbearable weight he carried. Here's what they never taught you. Lincoln's autopsy revealed something shocking. His adrenal glands were severely depleted, evidence of extreme, prolonged stress. Modern doctors who've reviewed the records believe Lincoln suffered from clinical depression, likely worsened by genetic factors and Marfan syndrome. The man we remember as strong and resolute was actually slowly dying from the inside, poisoned by stress hormones, ravaged by grief and guilt. Some medical historians argue that even if Booth hadn't killed him, Lincoln's body was shutting down. He was 56 years old, but his organs were those of an 80-year-old man. The war didn't just kill 600,000 soldiers, it killed Abraham Lincoln, too. We built a temple to Abraham Lincoln. We carved his face on mountains. We teach our children that he was a saint who freed the slaves and saved the nation. But the real Abraham Lincoln was something far more profound than a saint. He was a man who made impossible choices in impossible times. He sacrificed his own mental health, his family, and ultimately his life for an ideal he wasn't even sure he believed in. The truth is messier than the legend. Lincoln was pragmatic, calculating, often cruel. He prioritized victory over justice. He made decisions that haunt us still. And perhaps that's what makes him truly great. Not his perfection, but his willingness to carry the weight of imperfection for the sake of something larger than himself. The price of freedom wasn't just 600,000 lives. It wasn't just the destruction of an entire generation. The price was paid by a man who sacrificed his sanity, his happiness, and his soul. Lincoln gave everything, his son, his marriage, his health, his peace, so that we might inherit a more perfect union. But was it worth it? The question isn't whether Lincoln was a hero or a villain. The question is, could any of us have done better? Could any of us have carried that weight without breaking? The truth is, we'll never know, because we weren't tested. He was. 160 years later, we're still fighting the war Lincoln couldn't finish. Racial inequality persists. Democracy remains fragile. The Union he saved is divided once again. Some want to tear down his statues because he didn't do enough. Others worship him as a savior. Both are wrong. Abraham Lincoln was a man who made terrible choices in terrible times. He was cruel and kind, calculating and heartbroken, pragmatic and principled. He was, in other words, human, and perhaps that's the most important lesson of all. Freedom doesn't come from perfect heroes, it comes from flawed humans who choose to do the right thing, even when it destroys them. On the night he died, they found a poem in Lincoln's pocket. It spoke of death as a release, of eternal rest after impossible struggle. Oh, why should the spirit of mortal be proud? Abraham Lincoln paid the ultimate price for our freedom, not just his life, but his happiness, his health, his very soul. The question we must ask ourselves is this: are we worthy of his sacrifice? Are we continuing the work he died for, or have we forgotten the terrible cost of the freedom we take for granted? History remembers Abraham Lincoln as the great emancipator, but the truth is darker.
But the truth is darker, deeper, and far more powerful. He was a man who descended into hell so that we might glimpse heaven. That is his legacy. That is his darkest hour. That is the price of freedom.